Welcome back, guys, or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's the brand new Chevy Trax. But more specifically, this is the LT, so it's kind of a middle of the road trim level. It's in one of my favorite Chevy colors, named Sterling Gray Metallic, which has a lot of metallic flake and really complements the Trax curvature quite well. But for 2026, it's more expensive than it's ever been. There's new paint colors, and there's a whole lot else that we need to talk about to decide if this is one of the best subcompact crossovers you can buy, if it's still one of the best bargain value vehicles brand new, period. So today I'm going to share the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Chevy Trax and help you guys at home decide if it might be the right vehicle for you, or if you should leave it at the lawn. Look at the other subcompact and other compact competition. So today you can expect to see a walk around, all the specs, initial driving impressions, 0 to 60 on GPS, and then my final thoughts. And huge thanks to Twin Falls Chevy in Southern Idaho for letting me borrow this one for the day. I'll link them below if you're interested because they sell below MSRP. They ship all over the country. And also huge thanks to Lasfit, our sponsor for today. But more on that in a few minutes. Let's dive right into this review. And thank you so much for watching car videos on YouTube today. But if you get anything out of this video, you like the bold front fascia of the Chevy Trax, or you just appreciate the effort it took to make this video, please consider liking it. Comment your thoughts and opinions below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Basically, that all lets me know to make more stuff like this. It helps the video get shared, but it'll also help you by having YouTube then choose to show you more stuff like this. Thank you so much. But if you're new to Chevy, or you're new to the Chevy Trax, there's a few interesting things that you should probably know. Chevrolet is an all-American automaker. They were founded in Detroit, Michigan in the year 1911. But it wasn't until they were 102 years old that the very first Chevy Trax sold off the assembly line. And that first generation honestly looked quite a bit different than this. It was different in proportion, the sizes were off. It was very curvy, very bubbly. This second generation that came out for the 2024 model year, it's way more angular. It has a lot more aggressive front fascia, and it's kind of just the same design language that a lot of the new Chevy crossovers have these days, while being a little bit bigger, a little bit more spacious, and I think that's part of the reason why these have sold so well. This car was assembled in Korea. That's South Korea. The VIN starts with a K, and last year, or the last finalized year, this sold over 200,000 units, which is actually pretty good and about twice as many as this was selling just a few years earlier. So it's going to be interesting to see how these sell as the 2025 model year wraps up and the 2026 model year is just beginning. The biggest change, the biggest thing that we need to talk about right now is not the new paint colors for 2026, not any of the interior differences, the accessories offered, the slight differences that really just happen every year, year over year, but it's the fact that these now cost about $2,000 more, and it's the fact that the basic LS Trax now starts at $23,000, the same exact price as the slightly larger LS Trailblazer, a vehicle that I literally just hopped out of moments ago and have a video coming out or already out. So it's time to decide. After this one being an LT trim level with a few options starting at $24,500, with those options being closer to $27,000, we need to decide if the Trax is still worth it, or for $27,000, are you getting enough for your money? You get a vehicle that is not yet crash test rated, at least as of filming this today for the 2026 model year. But if we look at the last couple of years, especially 2025, it seemed to be on the Maroni stickers that these were about a 4-star overall crash test, and the IIHS has conflicting results. It just depends on which test they're performing for how well it holds up. But at this price point, you actually do have a decent amount of active and passive safety features. And while I have to say that some of them don't work the best in class, at least they're there. They're there to assist you. They're not there to drive the vehicle for you. So the main ones that this has are really bright LED headlights, adaptive cruise, which seems to work pretty well, and lane keep assist, which doesn't really work that well. First of all, it's turned off from the factory, so you do have to turn that on when you get into the vehicle for the first time when you take ownership, if that's a feature that you want on. But with my experience, after driving this around for a while, the thing likes to wander. It kind of bounces back and forth in its lane like a bowling ball that has the rails up. But overall, I'm glad it's there. I just wish that this had a more competent safety system, and I wish it was more standard across the board, eventually leading to a top safety pick rating if this did a little bit better like some of the competition, like the HR-V, like the Subaru Crosstrek, and like a few of the other things that it competes against. But for about $27,000, you're not necessarily buying the safest car on the road. You're buying one that looks really good. Honestly, most of those other cars are very bubbly. they're not subjectively that attractive, at least to the majority of people. This one is angular. It looks aggressive. It looks really nice. And the paint, very reflective, very metallic-y. But on the interior, you even have a leather-wrapped heated steering wheel. You have heated seats in the front. You have remote start. You have a bunch of screens between the infotainment and the entertainment displays. So you have a few features that a lot of the competition may or may not have at this price point, but there's a trade-off to every vehicle. And honestly, the Trax seems to be doing a pretty good job because a lot of people are buying these. And I think they're going to sell quite nicely, even with that $2,000 price premium on the lower trim levels. And I personally like driving small, lighter weight cars just because they're very maneuverable. They handle well. They're easy to park, especially in the average size parking space like this or the average garage. And modern vehicles are still big enough to be stable at highway and interstate speeds, and this is no exception. Overall, it is about 15 feet long. The wheelbase is roughly 9 feet, so it is very planted and stable on the road, especially where it is about 6 feet wide and 5 feet tall. So the stance is quite nice, and part of the reason why this one looks so aggressive compared to a taller, more rectangular and boxy SUV. And then it has a payload capacity of about 893 pounds, which is pretty impressive when this weighs about 3,000 pounds. It does have about 7.3 inches of ground clearance, a 350 final axle ratio, and it can do a full circle in about 35 feet. The last couple things to mention here is the gas door is located on the driver's side, which is where I prefer it out of convenience when you hop out of your vehicle. But unfortunately, when you lock the Trax, the gas door doesn't lock, so the bums might attempt to siphon some of your 14 gallons of regular octane fuel. The way that this front-wheel drive, 6-speed transmission, 3-cylinder turbo is rated, they get about 28 around town, about 32 on the highway, so your max road trip and range, if you're conservative on the highway, could be about 448 miles. And then it has a square stance all around. There is a compact spare tire in the rear under the cargo floor, and it's a tire size that I actually really like, and the same size from the Trailblazer LS that I just drove. It's a 225 60 sidewall 17 tire. This one is a Dynapro, and it has about 9/32 of tread, which is pretty average for an OEM tire. And then this is your key. You have lock, you have unlock in reverse order, you have remote start, and you have panic button. But honestly, you can leave this in your pocket because you actually have proximity key features right here to get in and out of the vehicle without using the remote. And then you also have a keyhole hidden there for the key that's hidden in your key fob remote. The driver's side door panel of the Chevy Trax on this LT trim level is actually really nice. The window, I do wish it was maybe a little bit bigger, having a slightly lower belt line, but overall it's pretty big. You can see that the door opens up nice and wide, so big in fact that if you're not careful it could hit a neighboring car, either the front or the rear, so just keep that in mind. But the materials kind of match a lot of the other Chevys. Even most of the expensive Chevys have kind of the cheaper, long-lasting plastic black materials. They're not going to fade. They're not going to be difficult to clean up. The trade-off is they're not the nicest door panels in the world. This door card with the Hobby Lobby yellow stitching is actually really nice. You have kind of a shiny black piano material right there, and hopefully it's in a place that it's not likely to get scratched up. The armrest, it's basically the same materials up here. I wish it was a little bit nicer, but at least you have a decent sized bottle and snack pocket. And then the speakers on the Trax really are nothing to talk about. They work, that's about all you need to know. They're not an upgraded system, there's not a ton of depth to them, but for the price point you're paying, there's nothing to complain about. And then the entryway is actually pretty nice on the Trax. You have some more accents. The dashboard also has some nice accents throughout. Tilting and telescoping wheel, it's leather wrapped. You have voice and volume controls. Or I should say volume controls on the back. Usually those on Chevys are for the station if you want to change that, or if you want to change the volume. You have the lighting stock, you have the windshield wiper stock. You have a completely manual seat, which has very little side bolstering. So it's going to accommodate a lot of people, but it's not going to hold you in well when you're cornering, which this vehicle is not made to do. And then you have some piano black around the shifter. And then today we finally get to talk about the sponsor of this video, Lasfit, a company that's based out of California. A company that's renowned for making truck bed mats, lighting upgrades for like all the incandescents that this vehicle has, or headlight bulbs or turn signals. But specifically, and especially in the case of the Chevy Trax, they make really good all-weather mats. So not only are they rubber, where these come from the factory's cloth, and usually you have to pay several $100s for a rubber upgrade, but they're not just the same footprint. They actually work, and they work really well. You guys can see just how sad and kind of pathetic factory mats are. They don't even cover the dead pedal most of the time. What about all this carpet? You don't want that to get disgusting. If you drop a milkshake by your feet, how are you gonna clean that up? How are these carpeted mats ever gonna be the same? And when there is so much carpet that's not protected by the floor mat, you might want to consider, because for a very good price, as will be linked down below with my discount code, you can actually get Lasfit mats for the front, for the middle, and for the cargo area. And usually all of those come for about as cheap as just the floor mats from the manufacturer, while being a much better product. Products that are made with better quality materials, in humane conditions and all that stuff. So I'm gonna link Lasfit below because they are an awesome company, and I'm so glad that they're today's sponsor, and I can't wait to show you my own examples as soon as they arrive in the mail. I'm really excited, guys. Anyways, let's hop inside, fire this puppy up, and see what else it has to offer. The interior of the Chevy Trax actually is pretty nice. The horn, it's high pitched, just like the Trailblazer. The steering wheel feels good, it's leather wrapped. The heated features on this and the seats actually get pretty hot. I had to turn those off earlier when I was just testing with them. But overall, other than wishing the windows were a little bit taller, dropping down lower so that you could see a little bit closer to the sides without really moving your head, it's pretty nice in here. I can't complain too much. I'm never going to be the biggest fan of the reflective screens. I would be okay with analog screens to save several $100s and not to have so many features tied into these. But thankfully, this Chevy has the headlight dial right here, and it's not integrated into that screen like it is on a lot of other Chevrolets these days. When you fire it up, you can see the basic displays come to life. The heads up for the safety features. Basically, red means you're basically crashed already. Yellow means you're just about to, and green usually means you are doing just fine. But you have voice and volume controls on the right. You have adaptive cruise on the left. It's kind of strange that they didn't fit the lane keep assist button there. So sometimes it takes me a while to find that because I forget it's there. Like when manufacturers have weird settings for some of their safety features, either tied into the screen and turned off, or like a random button up here or random buttons down here. So it's kind of interesting. This also doesn't even have as many options to fill out that blank space as the base, same price, Trailblazer LS. So kind of interesting, the similarities and the differences between these platforms. But ultimately, the main thing you need to know is Android Auto and Apple CarPlay exists. It's also kind of silly that they software engineered a whole software touch button just to turn off traction control. That's confusing. That adds unnecessary complications. Just put the button right there. There's room for it right there, Chevrolet. But those are just my thoughts and opinions. Otherwise, you have a good storage area. It's actually slanted down, but it's not rubbery like the Trailblazer was. You have a 12 volt, some plugins. You have right here, auto start stop off. The backup camera, the clarity is okay, but it takes up the whole screen and the trajectory lines do move. So I'm happy with that screen. You have an electronic parking brake, a regular 16-ounce bottle fits perfectly in here. You can also hold a phone if your phone's not overly wide or thick. And then you have some good storage right here and pretty good storage in here. It's kind of narrow, but that's kind of the theme of a vehicle this size. And then you have some incandescent lights up top. Lasfit, I'm sure, has a fix for that. Check them out if you're interested. Otherwise, just like the Trailblazer LS, there's no light on the vanity mirror, and that's sad. So with that said, let me hop out of this and into the back seats to see how I fit. Sitting behind myself in the Trax is going to be interesting because this is kind of an interesting class of vehicle. It's kind of a subcompact, kind of a regular compact. Just kind of depends on if you're counting it as a crossover or a car for what category it is. But it is about the same size as the HR-V and the Crosstrek and the CX-30 for that matter. Door panel material is basically the same. The door could open up a few more degrees and I'd be happy with that. But I think it opens wide enough for most car seats and most big dog kennels or anything else that you're going to be shoving into the back. And then this is how the seat lays when the 40 split is down. You actually have a lot of foot room. Kind of interesting, a lot of subcompacts and vehicles of this size, the head starts to get dug into the back of the driver's seat when I do that. You have the tether and you have two more tether points, the way every vehicle should be. But unfortunately back here, even though there is a lot of knee room, there's no vents. Unless there's vents hidden under the seat that I can't find. I really wish there were vents for this big of a back seat for occupants back here. And then there's no fold down armrest on this trim level. And then you have the privacy shade. So unless you remove that, which is easy to do and you find a good space to store it, you can't just easily reach over the headrest and pull out some stuff. And then another incandescent. So another good opportunity to upgrade to a cheap but very quality LED if you are interested. Anyways, back of these seats are leather. They feel very thick, very solid. So I think if kids are punching, if llamas are kicking, if there's anything going on, any funny business back here, I don't think you're gonna have to worry about damaging your seats. But another shortcoming, another area where Chevy decided to save money is there's no map pocket. There is a phone holder. Maybe that's the difference. Maybe that's the new map pocket. But some of us like a place to store papers and receipts and anything else you have that's long and map shaped. I think the back of the Chevy Trax actually looks pretty good. But if we start at the top, you have roof rails. They are raised up a little bit higher than some other sporty vehicles, but they're not as tall as like a Subaru roof rail. So hopefully it's not too difficult to attach your crossbars and your accessories to those, but maybe check that out for yourself. You also have an old school antenna. No shark fin on the Trax, at least this trim level. And then you have a nice touch with the spoiler. It even has the third brake light integrated. I think that looks really good. And then the rear wiper blade, which covers exactly what you need to be able to see through the rear view camera. You have the big bow tie in the center, holding it all together, almost like a present, like the bow on your present, which is what this would be if you just spent about $27,000 on it. And then in a chrome silver color, you have Trax, you have LT, you have some parking sensors, you have a non-functional mesh little bumper piece, you have reflectors, you have some more silver, some black. The exhaust muffler is right there, but the tip is kind of hidden from the naked eye. Really good departure angle. And with that said, let's pop open the hatch and take a look-see at what we have going on back here. So again, you do have the privacy shade. It's gonna help keep the heat down. It's gonna help unwanted people from stealing your stuff potentially. You have a nice lip that's really well weather protected around. You have an old school handle because remember, this does not have a power lift gate and it's not too difficult to pull down, which I'm happy about. But back here, you actually have the same amount of cubic space in entirety as you do in the Trailblazer. Kind of interesting. So you have 25 feet behind the second row. When you drop the second row, you have about 54, which is about on par with the rest of this class of vehicle. But the 25 feet when the seats are up, that is up to about 5 better than a lot of the competitors. Part of that comes to the fact that this is 6 feet wide and 15 feet long. So it has those dimensions going for it, even though it is a little bit shorter at 5 feet tall compared to the 5.5 foot tall Trailblazer. And then another incandescent light. It's not very bright. Personally, I would want an LED back here just to be able to see my stuff at night better. You have some wheel wells. You have a tie down on each end in the back. And then you have the lifting cargo floor with your temporary spare. Pretty good looking seam sealer, although it's not all carpeted down here. It's about what you'd expect. And you have enough room to store and hide a lot of other goodies. And with that said, let's lower the hatch and move on to the passenger side. The passenger side of the Trailblazer, I think would be pretty nice to ride in. You have the proximity key feature. You have blind spot on the mirrors. You do not have a turn signal, but I do like that the top half of the cap is painted, although that probably is just a piece of plastic. When you open up the door panel, the materials and basically the whole entryway, it looks just like the driver's side did, minus a few of the switch gear controls right there. You still don't have anything to greet you on the door sill. You still don't have power options for the seats, but at least they're heated. They get really hot. My backpack's having a good time. And let's see how insufficient this all-weather mat is, or this cloth mat. This one actually seems to be better than the driver. It goes up a little bit further, but you can still see at the top there's a couple inches where it could be more, as well as covering up on the side, because if a big splash of water comes down, it's just gonna roll right off the top of this, especially with the thread count of what these mats probably are. I don't know that they're gonna absorb very well, and if they do, that's gonna be a gross mat. Anyways, opening up the glove box, it's actually pretty big. But speaking of things that are pretty big, let's move around to the front. Let's pop the hood so I can show you the massive 1.2 liter 3-cylinder turbo engine. Okay, I know a 1200 cc or 1.2 liter engine is not massive, but I guess context is key. If this was a motorcycle we were talking about, that would be a big engine. But in an automobile that fits 5 people, that has a 900-pound payload capacity, this is the smallest engine that I've ever driven, that I can think of anyways, a 1.2 liter. So with the turbo, it busts out about 137 horsepower, but you have to crank it out to about 5,000 RPM, and then about 162 pound-feet of torque, but you have to crank that out to about 2,600 RPM. So this does make less power by 8 or 9% compared to the larger 1.3 cylinder turbo that's offered in the Trailblazer. but keep in mind, the boost is going to be a little bit different. The overall footprint of the engines, they actually look about the same in how they fit in the engine bay. And where you have the reservoirs on the periphery, the battery, the fuse box, the computer, and it is transversely mounted with the 3 cylinders like that, and the engine bracket, and then the serpentine belt and alternator on the passenger side. You have a lot of room. The turbo's right there on the exhaust manifold on the back, the catalytic converter, you can see the O2 sensor, the firewall is protected. Yeah, the intake manifold right there. So even though this is a small engine, I think it would be really easy to work on. But keep in mind, the 1.3 liter is a lot more stout. Even though the numbers are only a little bit higher, the peak torque, which is higher, comes on 1,000 RPM sooner. And I'm gonna try to do a comparison soon between the Trax and the Trailblazer. But also, if you watch my Trailblazer video, even though that vehicle weighs about 10% more than this, it is substantially more faster with only 1/10 of a liter more. Anyways, let's drop the hood and take this thing for a drive. Initial driving impressions of the Chevy Trax with the 1.2 liter. Let's get up to speed. I don't think it's just my opinion. Maybe it is, but 1.3, 1.2 liters, or any 3-cylinder in general, at least the ones that I've heard, I think they sound cool. They're fun. This honestly just feels like the new version of the Mitsubishi Mirage with the 1.2 liter 3-cylinder, something like that. It's fun. It manages itself pretty good for being a full-on small subcompact crossover, for being the size that this thing is, even smaller than the Trailblazer. This thing is actually fun to drive. The visibility is pretty good. Forward facing, the hood slopes down, so even though it does look fairly aggressive from the front angles and dimensions, it doesn't really compromise visibility like a truck does, or something that has a long, very parallel to the ground hood. Rear view mirror, you can see right down the center of the vehicle because these aren't very long. The side mirrors are big enough as well, and same thing when you turn your head and you just use the windows the old-fashioned way. But slowing down, taking a corner, and then powering out, it does take a second for the 1.2 liter to get back up to speed. There is a little bit of dead space before it has full boost, because if you don't have boost, if there's not positive turbo pressure, you only have 1200 cc, 1.2 liters of displacement, and that's just not enough strength in the rotational mass to get you going, so you need the boost that this thing pushes out. And once you're in boost, driving, at least unloaded with no one in the back, no cargo other than the backpack, honestly, it does pretty good. We are driving at over 5,000 feet of density altitude today, so that's not bad. But going up an incline in the winter or the summer, maybe when the heat's worse and air quality is even more poor, I don't know how this is gonna do if you're towing, if you have your family in here, if you're maxing out the payload capacity. But just driving through the country, even at country speeds, this thing feels pretty competent. There's a little bit of a bump right here. Let's see how it manages. Well, I think they just repaved the road, because honestly, that bump doesn't feel like anything compared to what it used to. But overall, I think this vehicle is fairly well laid out. And for the mid $20,000 ballpark, having heated seats and a heated steering wheel that's leather wrapped, that actually works well. I really can't complain too much about that. There isn't any lumbar support, which is something I do wish I had. And of course, all-wheel drive would be nice, you know, even if it was just a couple $1,000 option on these. But then you're really gonna be getting these pretty expensive for what they are. Anyways, for $25,000, I think this is a fun little vehicle to drive, and I highly recommend you test drive one for yourself. But with that said, let's get to the private road and do a 0 to 60. 0 to 60 in the LT Chevy Trax with the 1.2 liter 3-cylinder turbo. Keep in mind, density altitude is about 5,500 feet, so even though this is turboed, it's still down on power, probably at least 8%. I'll do a little bit of a brake rev, traction is off, but I don't see a sport mode on this one, at least one that I've found, so let's do a little bit of a brake rev and see what it can do. Maybe it might even do a burnout. Yeah, a little bit of tire spin once the boost kicked in. But that did take just a little while to get up to 60. The true time came in at 10.85 seconds, or roughly 1.7 seconds slower than a Trailblazer I just tested in the same density altitude with the 1.3 liter turbo engine. My final thoughts of the Chevy Trax, but specifically this LT with only a few options. So I actually like these cars. I think part of the reason is because they are so small. They weigh 3,000 pounds, and that's becoming less and less common. but they also have a somewhat torquey, when the boost kicks in, little 3-cylinder turbo engine, and on idle, it actually ticks a lot. If this was a different platform, if this was like a Hemi V8 or something, that tick might be concerning. But honestly, it's basically how every 3-cylinder I have ever driven sounds. I think that's just how the acoustics of these engines work, and I like it. It's fun, it's entertaining. You kind of can throw this around a corner, and then because you don't have very good seat bolstering, you kind of slide around a little bit, and that's part of the fun. I think this would be even funner if it was a more stiff vehicle, if maybe Chevy decided to have a performance trim level of this with, I don't know, the 1.5 Turbo 4 or some other engine. That would be pretty cool, but I'm certainly getting off track. I think this is a fun vehicle. I'm not surprised why 200,000 people have bought in this, especially in the most recent finalized year. I'm not sure that the $2,000-ish price increase is gonna diminish sales in the future right now, as that's the price for these, because that does start to creep up on really good competitive competition that this thing can compete against. And while this is only front-wheel drive and has a traditional 6-speed automatic, for $27,000, you are starting to get into the territory of pretty good larger 4-cylinder all-wheel drive cars, like the base versions of the Crosstrek and the Mazda CX-30 and a few other options. I'm not sure how this is gonna do, but I know that I had a lot of fun with it. I think it's probably the best looking vehicle in this class. At least that's subjective, that's how I feel today. And because of that, I highly recommend you test drive one of these and the competition. Form your own thoughts, form your own opinions, and comment below what your thoughts are. I'm just a random person making a YouTube video today, and with that said, I wish you guys the absolute best. If you're interested in a really good deal, check out the Twin Falls Chevy in Southern Idaho. They are seriously a whole lot of fun to work with, and if you live anywhere in the world and you want some really cool upgrades on your lights, your truck bed mats, your floor mats, which this thing certainly needs in my own opinion, check out Lasfit. They're really cool, and I'm gonna link them below if you're interested. With that said, take care, guys.